Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Spotlight. In today's episode we're going to be talking about 1985's A View to a Kill. Once again directed by John Glenn, starring Roger Moore. Let's roll. So, it has been quite a journey with Franchise Spotlight and Roger Moore. He had been in 7 James Bond films, including this one. Unfortunately, this one is his last one. With that being said, you can really tell that they dial the action down a lot in this, at least the physicality of it, of what Roger Moore has to do, because he is getting up in age. I believe he was 57 when they were shooting this. And you can really tell that the action is toned down, and you can tell that doesn't bode well for James Bond and the style that they want to go for. And I feel like because of the lack of physicality that James Bond can do in this, specifically Roger Moore, they really dialed up the villain in this, who was actually played by Christopher Walken, villain named Max Zorin. I personally am a fan of Christopher Walken. I pretty much love everything that he's in. Obviously, it's a huge plus since he's the James Bond villain. I would like to also add that A View to a Kill probably has my favorite James Bond theme song that was performed by Duran Duran. This is just a song that I've always grown up listening to because I'm a fan of Duran Duran. And with them doing a James Bond film, similar to Christopher Walken being in a Bond film, it just is bonus points for me at this point. So during the cold open, like I talked about in the last episode, how every Bond has a cold open, in this one, James Bond is recovering yet again another item that was on the body of a fallen 00 agent, and he has to go out, retrieve it, and similar to the last movie, find the breadcrumb trail that the last 00 agent left off at. That's kind of what this movie, or how this movie gets rolling. Oh, one of my lights died. Here we go. So, James Bond recovers this intel off of a fallen 00 agent, and he's skiing away from Russians off of a mountain cliff, which, you know, normally would build tension. However, in the middle of this, they ended up playing a Beach Boys song. And it really took me out of the chase scene because it just threw away any doubt that James Bond was going to be in, trouble, because ultimately they just threw away the scene by having a really goofy song play over a really goofy sequence. And while, yes, I'm all for being goofy and having fun with film, I don't think that this was the proper choice for them to go with. They could have totally left the song out and the sequence would have been just as good, if not better. Now, I really do have to give props to an actress in this movie, Grace Jones, who plays Max Zorin's right-hand woman, if you will. The reason why I give her major props is because at the time of this, she was dating Dolph Lundgren, who she ended up getting him a role in this movie. This was Dolph Lundgren's debut in a feature film, so thank you, Grace Jones, for giving us Dolph Lundgren.
General Gogol.
A calculated risk, but necessary since you refused to answer your... You disregard procedure. You did not request approval before eliminating double...
So with the villain of Max Zorin and dialing down the action sequences that Roger Moore is capable of, they end up dialing up the violence in this, specifically from Max Zorin, the villain in this. And what I mean by that is he ends up flooding a canyon that he and his company dug near Silicon Valley because he wants to flood Silicon Valley and kind of take over and be the #1 tech company in the world. Is ultimately his master plan, which James Bond thwarts, as always. So once the cave is dug out, he ends up flooding and presetting the charges That way, the canyon, the cave, floods with all of his workers in there, and he ends up taking a machine gun and just starts mowing down survivors for some odd reason. I mean, I don't think this was the best character choice. Obviously, if you want to enforce that he is this really ultimate backstabbing villain, then that makes sense. But it just felt like it was over-the-top violence that this movie didn't really need, and it wasn't really asking for it. I felt like that was just a decision that they wanted to make to push on that Max Zorin is a horrible villain and a horrible guy and he can't be trusted, which he ends up backstabbing Grace Jones's character in the flooding occurrence. So I guess that is kind of the point that they were trying to get across, but it felt like it was way over the top violence from a villain that the James Bond franchise didn't really need. And I know Roger Moore specifically was not a fan of the violence that was in the movie because he also thought that that wasn't what James Bond movies entailed at the time. Although I would like to point out, I've talked about Grace Jones a few times as the right-hand woman, but she is a complete total badass in this. To the point where she just even lifts up a man by herself and threatens to throw him across like a horse track. And totally fucking badass, if you ask me.
Enough of this! Control yourselves!
I will say Grace Jones is by far one of the better right-hand henchmen that the James Bond franchise has had. Unfortunately, she's not as iconic as Jaws or Oddjob, but in my personal opinion, she is definitely one of the top-tier henchmen in the Bond franchise. There is also a line in this that I can't believe they said, but in every James Bond movie so far, it feels like that they say the title of the film that they're in. So Octopussy, obviously the female counterpart to James Bond, her name was Octopussy. This one, A View to a Kill, no one's name is A View to a Kill. However, Christopher Walken overlooks the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, and what does he say to himself? He says, "Wow, that looks like a view to a kill." That doesn't sound right. Don't say that. Don't write that. Please, don't. That's horrible. It felt gross hearing it because it just didn't fit. Like, it doesn't make sense. A view to a kill. What? Don't say it. Please. But despite all the what may be negative things about the film, I honestly had a lot of fun watching this, and knowing it was Roger Moore's last film, I gave it some leeway as far as the action goes. So I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. But, you know, go ahead and watch for yourself and form your own opinion, because these are just mine. But thank you everyone for watching, and so long.